great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being there with us at this EUA webinar. My name is Razan. I'm from the Higher Education and Policy Unit here at the European University Association, and we are very happy to have you for this webinar, which will last for 1 hour. So before I forget, I first need to mention some technical features for this webinar, as for any other EUA webinar if you attended any in the past. So this meeting is recorded, so this webinar is recorded, and it will be made available in EUA's YouTube channel after the webinar took place. And you will receive an email if you register for this webinar with the link as well as the presentations that will be featured during this webinar. You will not be able to talk with us, but you will be able to interact with us through the chat box that you can see on the bottom of your computer. And actually, I see that many of you are already active there and exchanging their good greetings. So hello, everybody who already greeted each other. And you are most welcome during the whole webinar to send your comments, your questions, and we will try to pick some of those during this webinar so that we can also have some kind of interaction with our presenters. All right, so we will start by first, see if this works. Yes, sorry, first technical issue, but all right. So I will start by first briefly reminding you about the program of this webinar. So first we will introduce to the Tandem Project, and then we will have my colleague Henriette here, who will briefly present the main findings and conclusions from this study. Then we will try to pick up some of your questions from the chat box, if any. And we have the pleasure in the second half of this webinar to have 3 guests from a university, from a ministry, and also from an merit center to discuss together the findings from this tandem study. And then hopefully we should still have some minutes to have some interaction with you through, again, the chat box and the questions that you would send there. So this is the program that is waiting for us in the upcoming hour. I will first start by saying a few words about EUA, because this time, unlike the other EUA webinars, we did not only target our own community of European universities. So perhaps just a few words of introduction about what the European University Association is. So the association was established in 2001, but from the merger of 2 associations that already existed for a few decades. And we are a member association, which basically means that we have approximately 800 universities as members, and they are, as you can see on the map, they are located in the 47 countries of the so-called European higher education area. So we cover the whole European higher education area. We also have, besides individual universities as members, we also have as members the 33 national rectors conferences in the European higher education area, which also means that we also reach out to national levels for higher education. What we do is that we try to be the voice of universities in policy making, and also we propose a whole range of services aiming at sharing practices among our members, boosting institutional development, etc. And in this context, what we started to do already a few years ago is to work on the topic of refugees and welcoming refugees in higher education in Europe, notably by compiling all initiatives that we could collect into a refugee welcome map that is available on our website, and you might know. And the project, the Tandem Project that we are presenting today, is basically in the continuation of our commitments on this topic of welcoming refugees in and through higher education in Europe. So now that I have done my part in introducing this webinar, I will introduce you to our first speaker, who's Geertrui Lano, that we are trying to. So Geertrui is from the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, and more specifically, she's from the organization's regional office in Norway and Switzerland. And she's a senior specialist on labor mobility and human development. And she coordinates IOM programming and provides policy guidance on migrant integration, labor migration, and also the linkages between migration and development. And Gertrude will briefly introduce us to the Tandem Project. So Gertrude, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all participants. I'm Gertrude Lano, and I work at the IOM regional office in Brussels, mainly on questions related to migrant integration. Now, I would like to introduce to you the Tandem Project, but before doing so, would also like to tell you a bit more about IOM, because perhaps certain of the participants are also not our usual audience. So IOM is an international organization. We were established in 1951, and basically our mandate is to ensure that migration happens in a humane and orderly manner for the benefit of migrants and societies. Now, for this, we work together with our partners in several areas. First of all, to understand migration issues better. So this relates to research, to information. Secondly, to support also governments in terms of migration management. Thirdly, we encourage development through migration, because as IOM, we firmly believe that if migration is well managed, if it happens in a safe, regular and orderly manner, that this can be of benefit for the migrants, but also for countries of destination and origin. And then finally, we work to uphold the human dignity and well-being of migrants. We currently have 173 member states that you will see on the map. So it's an international organization that covers the whole world. We have in Europe, under the responsibility of the regional office in Brussels, all the EU member states, Norway and Switzerland. Now, in terms of policy developments, I also wanted to inform all of you about the Global Compact on Migration. As you might have heard, this compact was adopted in December 2018, and it's really the first international agreement that is covering all dimensions of international migration. Again, the aim really here is that countries work together to ensure that migration can happen in a safe, orderly and regular way, and this is actually guided by the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, where there is a specific target, 10.7, that calls upon well-managed and orderly migration. Now, interestingly, in this Global Compact on Migration, there is also reference made to education. There is a specific objective, Objective 15, that relates to access to basic services for migrants. And under this, we also call upon the provision of inclusive and equitable quality education to migrant children and youth, as well as facilitating access to lifelong learning opportunities for migrants. So within this background, IOM also works on education. Of course, we are not an education specialized organization. We're specialized in migration, but in a number of our activities, of course, education is present within larger goals, such as, for example, migrant integration. We believe that education is a very essential element of migrant integration, but also in terms of reintegration for migrants that return to their host countries. Also in terms of social cohesion. To give an example, we work also a lot with diaspora in the context of our MIDA program, which stands for Migration for Development in Africa. And there we work specifically in the education in Somalia, where we bring specialized experts from the diaspora, for example, from Finland, to build capacity in their country of origin in Somalia to better provide education, higher education.
Sì, è verde e volume.
Okay, moving on from this, I would like to present to you the Tandem Project, under which the study that Henriette will later present has been conducted. The Tandem Project is funded. The Tandem Project is funded by the European Union under the AMIF funds and actually aims to empower migrant youth in Southern Europe. And the broader objective is to build a bridge between migrants and local youth to promote mutual understanding, to promote dialogue, and to promote, in this way, integration. Now, under this project, we're really targeting youth that are in higher education institutions, because we believe universities are a key area where we can start promoting dialogue and integration. It's a 2-year project, and it is implemented by IOM together with EUA and another partner, Croatia, which is in charge of elements related to interreligious dialogue. And the project covers 6 countries, which is Croatia, Cyprus, Greece, Italy, Malta, and Spain. And throughout these countries, we have 11 universities that are actively involved in this project. Now, why universities? First of all, as we said, we really think education is a key for inclusion. It's a key for migrants to be able to integrate fully in the host societies. Secondly, we also feel that by fostering engagement of young students, this can really promote integration, promote social cohesion. We also see diversity and intercultural awareness as key values that we would like to promote in universities. Universities are also places where dialogue and communication can happen between youth that are of different backgrounds, including those with a migrant background. And finally, we like to promote interreligious dialogue and understanding. So in Tandem, we do this through different components. There are actually 4 key components. The first one is a regional social media campaign. As I said at the start of the presentation, as IOM, we like to work also on promoting understanding of migration issues, raising awareness, and we felt that nowadays, perhaps, it's also useful to do this through social media and not limit ourselves to the traditional means of communication. So we have a social media campaign that is happening and covering all the 6 countries, where basically youth themselves are contributing changing the narrative on migration and demystifying some of the stereotypes. Secondly, we have a component that relates to mentorship in universities that's implemented in different universities in Italy and Spain, where the idea is that we want to support the integration of students with a migrant background by having a mentorship scheme where other students help students with a migrant background or refugee students. Then thirdly, we have an aspect of interreligious dialogue where we encourage to have an interaction, an interfaith, intercultural dialogue between different groups of different faiths. And then finally, with the last component, we have the cross-country regional study that is looking at access-related needs and barriers of migrants in accessing and succeeding in higher education. So the idea is here, how can we promote inclusive education? And we did that through an assessment in the different countries involved. This study was conducted by EUA, and Henriette will later provide you further information on the findings of this interesting study. Now, to conclude on Tandem, I would like to share with you also the website where you can find information on the project, but also we encourage you to look on Facebook, Instagram to follow our social media campaign. You can also email the Tandem team. And of course, we encourage everyone who's interested to actively participate and disseminate the social media campaign and the study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gertrude, for your presentation. Well, now we will directly go into actually the findings of the study, because I have here Henriette Schroeder, our policy analyst here at UA, who is in charge actually of all our refugee-related activities and projects. And she's also the author of the study on higher education for third country national and refugee integration in Southern Europe. So now we'll keep quiet.
Thank you very much, Therese. And I will go right into it as I have the difficult task to present an 80-pager in about 10 minutes time or so. So I will try to be brief and succinct and present you the main findings and recommendations of our study on higher education for third country nationals and refugee integration in Southern Europe, i.e. in the Tandem countries. Before going to the findings, perhaps some words on the aims. As you can see here in the little pictogram on the top, we had as a prerequisite our basic idea that integration has some links to higher education participation, and that participation of third country nationals and refugees also has some impact on their societal integration in the host countries. So we try to explore links between policies and practices in both of the areas, integration, higher education, and of course see if there's any specific access barriers for the target groups to devise concrete recommendations as well. In terms of target group, you can here see at the bottom of the slide, I also outlined the scope. We're looking into third country nationals as per standard definition, as you can see on the slide here, but also decided to have a specific closer look at the subgroup of refugees. At this point, I would like to make an editorial note, because in terms of refugees, we are actually we are actually using this term to cover several groups, just so that I don't have to repeat over and over again. Refugees, asylum seekers, those in a refugee-like situation, anyone under any form of international protection, and so on and so forth. So I will use this term very, very broadly, but of course being aware of the different legal situations. And as Troy has already said, we did cover 6 countries, those that you can see here also in the map of the Tandem Project. Okay, in terms of methodology, we looked into the legal and the policy framework with regards to access barriers to higher education. For instance, admission requirements set by the national level or recognition practices in the country. We surveyed 37 higher education institutions and did a lot of interviews with ministry, national and regional level bodies that are responsible for those 2 policy areas, integration and higher education. I see someone is moving the mouse over my presentation. One of the speakers, could you please stop using the mouse? Thank you very much. This is not me, the little red arrow. I think it's Paola. Okay. Also, as part of the interviews, we asked questions to the NICNARICs, those are the recognition agencies and information centers for the recognition of prior higher education degrees in each of the countries, because from our previous work, we already knew that when it comes to the integration of those 2 target groups into higher education, this is a topic that is perceived as a specific challenge. Okay. No. Could you please move it? Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So, as I said, it is quite a long report, and I won't go into specific detail, especially into details with regards to countries. I don't want to point fingers, but I will give some examples from countries when I present the Tandem Project recommendations and the main challenges and findings that are also highlighted here. For your information, if you are from one of the Tandem countries, it might be of interest to you to look actually in the last section of the report, where we look into country-specific details. Other than that, throughout the publication, we are taking a comparative review approach to the topic across the 6 countries, giving examples here and there. Okay, so first, before I go into recommendations, perhaps some more general main findings or general statements about the report. Of course, we were quite happy, and it was quite straightforward to see that higher education can play indeed a crucial role to societal integration of migrants, and thus contribute to their social cohesion, but their understanding of the role of higher education as a vehicle towards societal integration was certainly very diverse across the different countries. I will elaborate on that in a moment. We found a lot of evidence for the clear benefits of integrating third country nationals and also those with a refugee background into higher education. So to give you a couple of examples from the viewpoint of the individual level, integration of the target groups was empowering on a social and economic level, changing in a way the perception from arriving in a host country as an asylum seeker or refugee to becoming an international student, to perhaps being a successful graduate that then on the national level can contribute to the workforce, to the national talent pool, and become an active citizen. But this has also benefits for higher education institutions who nowadays, in the context of the European higher education area, are highly internationalized anyway. They, of course, regularly welcome international talent, and their participation, of course, can also enhance their global connectivity. And the last general statement that you see here on the slide is that when we conducted the research, we were not so much surprised that the conditions set by the national level policies and higher education institutions' practices with regards to access to higher education were really diverse. Yet actually the challenges in general terms faced by the third country nationals were fairly similar. It was definitely also clear and to be expected in a way that refugees were facing additional barriers when accessing higher education. But they were, in the end of the day, they would also draw more benefits from participation. Okay, overall we have 8 recommendations in the report. I would just like to very briefly introduce them. When you read the report, actually under each of those recommendations, we have one specific one for each policy level, European and national policy level, as well as for the higher education institutions themselves. But here I will just try to do a summary and perhaps also give you some examples from the Tandem countries' policy approaches there. So first of all, our recommendation is to recognize the potential of the higher education sector's contribution to societal integration. Now, Therese already mentioned our work with regards to Refugees Welcome Map. We have run several projects with universities on integrating refugees, and overall we can stay quite straightforward that the sector is very active in welcoming this specific target group. But we like to see other universities also to follow suit and to recognize their social responsibility, ensuring that the student body that they are taking into their campus reflects the societal diversity of their environment, their region, their city, their country. And arguably, when looking into the Tandem countries, migrants, newcomers that arrive in the Tandem countries are part of this societal diversity. For the policy levels in this first recommendation, we would also like to see that institutional practices are considered for further upscaling. As I had said, there's already a lot of good practice going on at the higher education institutions. And actually, when looking into the national integration policy plans, you can see that only one of the countries actually straightforward mentioned the work done by the higher education institutions. This would be Italy in their national integration policy or strategy, actually saying that, talking about good practices at institutions with regards to programs such as the mentorship program that we're currently running for Tandem, and also hinting at potential for further upscaling. The second point here is to increase policy support for participation in higher education as a means to integration. Now, overall, when reviewing integration strategies and plans in the 6 countries, we could very clearly see that they all place a lot of emphasis on education as a means, as a vehicle to societal integration. However, in detail, this would then mean that they focus on enhancing access to primary, secondary education. Language training was certainly always a feature, but there's very rarely a link to higher education. While 3 out of the 6 countries that we reviewed make some mention of higher education in their integration policy, in the overarching plan, so to say, there is a big but, because those are fairly general. There's not many specific measures, and only one country, namely Croatia, there's actually a specific budget line allocated to higher education measures such as scholarships. In the case of Croatia, also student housing and so on and so forth. This links also to the next recommendation. Of course, the lack of policy commitment in a way also translates into a lack of overall targeted funding. I already mentioned the scholarships, but perhaps we could also take a look here at the European level. EUA has for quite some time advocated for the establishment of a specific targeted program for refugee students and researchers, perhaps embedded it into the current already ongoing education programs such as Erasmus+, but also with synergies with those funds that directly deal with third country nationals, such as the AMI Fund and so on and so forth. And we would stand by this approach and would like to see more investment directly to include the refugee students and researchers at institutions, but also for the institutions that aim to welcome them. Sorry, yes, wonderful. The next point is enhancing multi-stakeholder transsectoral policy development and implementation. Now, when reviewing again the national level strategies, both for integration and higher education for third country nationals, it became quite clear that in principle they all value a transsectoral approach, but in the end of the day we could see that in the implementation of plans in some countries more than others, and I don't want to point fingers here, approaches are very centralized in the end of the day. We hardly ever see that the Education Ministry has their own portfolio for integration policy measures. There might be consultation of stakeholders such as NGOs at some point of the development of the strategy, but we certainly see a lot of more potential to, for instance, work with civil society and institutions in the implementation. What we did not see at all in the development of integration plans was that the target groups themselves were actually involved. Beyond perhaps a small consultation, we would find it beneficial if also refugees, third country nationals, were actually actively involved in the implementation of these kind of measures. Number 5, consider integration as a two-way process. In a way, also linking to the previous one, this recommendation actually focuses a bit more on the positive benefits of integration activities and measures. This makes particular sense in the context of countries where the perceptions around newly arrived migrants are perhaps on the negative side, as it is indeed the case for some of the tandem countries as well. Successful integration from our viewpoint is reciprocal, and we believe that measures that are implemented for third country nationals should also target the host societies themselves. This is also perhaps a message around communication. There are certainly positive benefits of these measures also for host societies. These could be better communicated by the EU, for instance, as a part of their EU in my region campaign, where you click on your city and you see what the EU invests for and what the benefits are of those programs. But for concrete examples for higher education institutions, you could also have a look at the Tandem Project itself. Troy mentioned already the Tandem mentorship scheme, and here we see very clear evidence of the benefits also for the local student body when participating in this kind of program. Question number 6, recommendation number 6, I'm sorry, to ensure equal treatment of national or EU students with refugee students. This might be a bit of a technical recommendation, but it is a very important one. When we reviewed higher education access and admissions policies throughout the countries, we found that in most cases, refugee students or those with a refugee background were regarded very often as your standard third country national student, by which I mean this could also be an American student coming to Malta to study a degree. This then translates in things like refugee students falling into specific quotas for third country national and international students, paying significantly higher fees as do third country national students, and perhaps also having to meet additional admissions requirements. Now, arguably, refugees have more urgent integration needs, and we believe that policy approaches with regards to admissions and practices at higher education institutions should perhaps be revised and to either give them a little preferential treatment or to set them on par with the EU national peers who usually face the same admissions requirements. Okay, number 7 is to address the information gap and streamline procedures. Indeed, the information gap was very clear when we were talking to refugees and third country national students, but this came also out as a challenge from the survey of higher education institution representatives. It is, of course, very difficult for an international student to navigate a higher education system that they are newly arrived to. There's certainly a lack of specific information for this very specific target group that has to fulfill additional requirements, perhaps has to fill in additional forms. And one topic that kept coming back, and I'm happy we do have a representative from an NIGNARIC with us today, was recognition of prior degrees. There was a lot of confusion about whether this had to be done over the recognition agency, whether the university was autonomous enough to admit themselves, to recognize themselves for admission purposes, even from the institutions themselves. It was not always so clear. So we also see a lot of potential for communication and information there. And my last recommendation here is to include the perspective to higher education access in integration and language courses. As I had said, each of the countries has an integration plan, or at least some projects on integration going on. All of them feature some sort of language training. Most of them feature integration courses. When it comes to language training, though, the realm of the offer, the scope of the offer is really diverse, ranging from a couple of lessons to a year or so of training. We believe that with regards to higher education access, there should be an offer, it should be possible to be trained to B2 level of the local language, which is usually the requirement to access higher education. And perhaps there should even be an option for potential students to participate in training for academic language as well. Yeah, and this was the main recommendations. We will discuss them with the following speakers, and hopefully they can give us their perspective of their institution, organization, and from their country. But I would like to finish on a positive note. As I had said, we interviewed, or actually the colleagues in the local IOM offices kindly interviewed, I think 17 or 18 students from third countries, and they all gave us very interesting and constructive feedback. At times fairly critical, but they all also had something very positive to say. And just to sum it up, perhaps with the student voice from Italy, who said that it is nice because here, i.e. in Italy, university is a place of diversity. There are so many different cultures. Or as a Greek student says, I feel like being at home. Well, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Henriette, for your presentation. I think you underlined very clearly also this, well, that universities used to and have been used to for a while to have internationalization strategies and strategies targeting country nationals, but not necessarily adapted to an audience of refugees, and there are still some efforts to do in this regard. But I would like to first also give the floor to our other presenters, also because I see that there is no real question yet in the chat box. So I really would like to encourage you, if you have questions for our presenters or just comments on the topic, to put them in the chat box. It seems that we had some sound issues so far, so sorry for this. We tried to fix them, but I'm not sure if it gets better. And in any case, a headset is probably going to help if the sound is there, but not totally clear. So sorry for this. I would like to give the floor to now to three speakers that we have, so respectively from Greece, from Italy, and from Malta. I don't know if that's possible to put already the first one on the camera. Thank you. So our first speaker after Henriette is Alexandros Triantakoulides. I hope I pronounced it correctly, Alexandros. You're from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, Greece, and you're an associate professor in biology, but you're also the coordinator of a EU-funded project in refugee integration at the university. So now you have a few minutes also to perhaps explain a little bit what you are doing, but also to comment on the findings of the Tandem study that Henriette just commented. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. I'm very honored to be able to discuss for some minutes and with all of you findings within the work that we have done the past 2 years, and also to discuss that in the wider European context and focusing specifically on the Mediterranean. As a representative of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki from northern Greece, we tried our best to try to tackle a problem which has to do with the integration of refugee students. Greece has done a lot of work on supporting refugees, the numbers of refugees that have come the past years into the EU. And for this reason, and because everything is about integrating and helping refugees in the higher education as well, that's why, as a university, we applied for a project along with the University of Cologne and Vrije University of Amsterdam, as well as the Greek Council of Refugees. And this project is the Sucre project. This is a project that has finished, and you can find all the outputs of the project in this link here, which you will have at the end of this seminar, of this webinar. This project, I will give you some small details about it. It was about looking at the problems that refugee students and universities face in order to be able to support them, but we all looked at different levels. We wanted to look at the level of the problems and the challenges, and also offering best practices as regards what refugee students that want to apply to enter universities have to face. Then specific problems that refugee students face as they enter universities, and also looking at problems that scholars, postdocs, scientists, professors have to face as they try to enter European universities. This, all three different outputs, we have already prepared publications on challenges on the best practices that universities have to follow. These were based on work that was done with surveys, online surveys, and also desktop research. And it was always looking both on all levels, refugees, university staff, and university higher rectors and problems that they have to face. Apart from that, on another level, we also looked at the general refugee population. So we have a lot of results as regards in the frame of the open digital education modules, as regards what needs to be known by practitioners that are working in the general refugee, with the general refugee population, such as psychologists or doctors or law professionals trying to support the general refugee population. Based on this work that we have done that is now finished, we are hosting refugee staff training week, which is supported by the Utrecht network in Thessaloniki in 1 month from now. This is already more or less closed as regards the participation, but we can discuss. You can always send me an email and we can see if you could be able to come. And of course, one of the most important things that are happening in Greece as regards trying to support refugee integration is the passport. Is the passport project, which where the Greek Ministry of Education is also participating. And of course, this is something, Paula, yeah. This is also something that is supported by the Council of Europe. Of course, there are also other stuff that are going right now, looking at work that the University of Piraeus is doing on employability of refugees, and some other projects which, however, are not specifically targeted to refugee student integration. As regards the problems that Greece faces, I definitely agree with the challenges that the Tandem Project has already identified, and the recommendations are excellent. I would just give you some small points of example from the Greek side. Big problem, I think one of the most important things to remember in Greece, which makes it different from other countries, is that admission to universities in Greece is decided centrally by Ministry of Education. No university, however much it wants, can accept refugee students or any kind of student unless there is a decision for the Ministry of Education. We have discussed with the Ministry of Education again and again, the Greek ministers, about this. There have been talks within the Greek ministry for more than 2 years. But whereas there has been success as regards integration of refugee children in first level and second level, for the universities, we're still waiting for that. Of course, on the other side, on the side of the universities, it's also an issue of the rector's ability and willingness sometimes to integrate refugee students, TCN students. With all the problems that Greece has faced with the financial crisis in the past years, their focus, unfortunately, has been mostly securing a high-level education for Greek students. Sometimes it's not a priority. We have tried with the University of Piraeus, with the University of Aegean, to make that an issue for the rectors' meetings. I don't think it has been successful until now. Another thing that we have to remember is that there is a lot of bureaucracy, and as we have already identified, it's always difficult for non-Greek students, and it's not just TCN students. The Greek universities, as a rule, were always more focused on giving education to Greek students. Though we have been very successful with Erasmus students, which is, however, just a part of their studies in Greek universities, as regards helping a student who is non-Greek coming from the start and doing all his studies in Greece, this has not always been so the focus of Greek universities. So we need to do more work as regards giving them everything they need to know about how to enroll in Greek universities. The good thing about Greek universities is that if we accept, and when we accept, we'll be able to accept bachelor refugee students, we don't have to pay. They don't have to pay anything. For master programs, however, TCN students, in most cases, not in all cases, will have to pay some money, and this is something where we need more funds. Of course, the problem is, again, the recognition of the prior qualification, of the prior skills. The Passport project can help a lot in that direction. However, it's still not also a law in Greek universities or from the Greek Ministry of Education that if you have the passport, the European qualification passport, then you're allowed to enter the Greek universities. And finally, we definitely need some more support from the national government as regards language programs, which have been advertised in the past, but unfortunately, more than a year later than that, we still don't have the money to do something like that. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandros. That was a very interesting, more detailed and in-depth analysis of the Greek situation. All right, I will now try to get to Paola Castellucci from Italy, who had some technical issues, so I'm not quite sure if she's with us, but let's try.
No.
Paola, are you there? Yes? Paola, are you there? Can you hear us? Yes, I think Paola had some issues, so perhaps we can first go to Stefan and then see if we can come back to Paola later. But no, I hope that Stefan is there. Sorry, we keep having some technical issues in this webinar, so thanks for your question.
Hello, can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Great pleasure. As I said, my name is Stefan, and I work at the Maltese ENIC NARIC, which is basically the recognition for academic qualifications in Malta. So what my brief presentation will seek to do is to explain the processes of how we provide the service for recognition of academic qualifications for refugees. And as Henry had previously mentioned, this means even people in a refugee-like status. So going down to the first slide, let me see if I can, okay. Very briefly, we do not make any distinction in how we provide a recognition service between Maltese citizens or people who are third country nationals or people who are applying for refugee status or have acquired refugee status. The only distinction that we do and we offer a positive discrimination sort of way, is that people who already enjoy some form of international protection are waived any administrative fees for applying for a service, subject that we have confirmation that they do have, obviously, some form of refugee status, and they are not in a financial position to pay. Why do we make the request to verify what is their financial situation? The reason is we have had instances in the past where we had people with refugee status who are actually in a very financially sound position, and we have to be careful not to discriminate against any other applicant, whether Maltese citizen or third country national who financially cannot pay the service. But basically speaking, anyone who essentially has refugee-like status, he can apply for our recognition service, and this service is free. In fact, looking at the slide, the second bullet, it says service provided for refugees at empiric discretion. To be clear, what it means is provided free at empiric discretion, because we provide a service for everyone. Now, what is the process? What do we require from the refugees? Generally, what we do request is that they provide us a copy of the qualification. When this is possible, it facilitates things a lot. And the reason I say this is because a big part of the people who apply with us with a refugee-like status are coming from the southern littoral of the Mediterranean. And our know-how and knowledge with qualifications from that area is not as detailed as qualifications coming from Europe, as an example. So for us, it is important that we ask for the qualifications. Can we provide a recognition service for academic qualifications for people without the documents? Potentially, yes. The difficulty here is this. Sometimes we find hesitance from refugees from providing us documentation, because it could actually affect their refugee application, because sometimes they do not want to disclose their country of origin. And we have noticed this issue also when we work in conjunction with the local refugee associations. Other than that, the difficulty of processing refugees who do not have academic documentation with them is that sometimes it becomes difficult for them to either join a higher education institution or find employment. The reason is this: the service that we provide is that we verify that the awarding body that has given the qualification, and even the qualification itself, do exist, have been quality assured, and we give them a comparability rating with the national education framework. But we do not guarantee that the refugee has that actual qualification. So when a refugee does not present the academic qualification, the actual original certificate, the employer or sometimes a higher education institution can be a bit reticent of actually taking on board the refugee, either for employment purposes or to take up higher education. It is also a question of human resources. We are currently investing on improving our skills in trying to determine if a refugee who does not have any documentary evidence of their qualification, in trying to determine if this person actually has that academic qualification. If I go to the next slide, just some quick statistics, you will find here that we are seeing basically a continuous increase over the years of the number of people with refugee status that applied with us. The statistics, as you can see, are not indicating a big number of refugees who have applied with us. And as I highlighted earlier, the issue is because of the geographical location of Malta, the number of refugees or the people that come to Malta applying for refugee status may not necessarily be coming from countries that may be eligible for refugee-like refugee status. So they do not want to disclose any official documentation that may indicate their country of origin. And I'll just discuss one final slide. If I can go to the next slide. It is an indication of the approximate comparability of qualifications that we have received from refugees. And generally they are at a diploma to bachelor level. One final comment I would like to discuss. What we have noticed in discussions with the employment authorities in Malta and with the higher education institutions of Malta is probably the biggest stumbling block for refugees and third country nationals, and even for Maltese students in some cases, is actually the language. Hello, can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay, I'll continue. Okay, the big issue that we found is the language. In Malta, we have 2 official languages, but English is one of the official languages, and education is provided also in English. Unless the student is competent in the English language to a satisfactory level, they will find great difficulty in taking up further education at university or any higher education institution. And this is not a problem which is restricted to refugees, but also to third country nationals in general, and as I said, even to Maltese citizens. So we are, as a country, stressing and trying to tackle this issue of ensuring that all people seeking higher education have sufficient skills in the English language. And if I can make just one final point before closing regarding what rights does a person, a third country national or refugee, have to further higher education. Refugees are really entitled to free primary and secondary education in Malta. However, refugees under the age of 18 that are undertaking studies up to undergraduate or foundation courses are entitled to free education at our college, which specializes in vet courses, and we have another junior college. But at university level, this is something that is purely at the discretion of the awarding institute, at the discretion of the university to see under what terms of conditions it may wish to adopt them to continue the studies. I am willing to take questions later on. Thank you.
Very much. I will make to our host is with us now. Paula, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, so, oh, here you are. It's great to see you because we had some technical issues. So Paula is from the Ministry of Education, Universities and Research in Italy, and she will say a few words about the situation in Italy. And after that, we will have a round of discussion. Thank you.
Okay. I speak about the legislative point of view of our ministry, of course. The previous presentation were very interesting, and it was the point of view of the other side. I'm representing the ministry, Italian ministry, so it is another point of view, of course. So in Italy, the Ministry of Education is in charge for higher education policy in order to facilitate the integration of third country nationals and refugee students. we have our law of an old law, of course, but it was it had a lot of modification in the time from 1998. That with this law, it was established rules and regulation for immigration, for the access and participation of international students and refugees. Of course, through the collaboration with our ministry and the Ministry of Home Affairs, it was written, and other ministries as Ministry of Labor, Education, Foreign Affairs, has written the National Plan for Integration. The activities of the National Plan for Integration is co-financed by the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, an European fund, and other sources as a structural fund, like social fund. An important policy for us, it was the European Qualification Passport for Refugees, and it was a tool that have a strong effect in our university. It was a lot uses, and it's thanks to our efforts, but our efforts of CINEA, our National Information Center of Recognition of Qualification, we have this instrument that the ministry co-financed from the 3 years plan. The purpose of the project is the evaluation of refugee qualification when we have a partial or absent documentation. And in case of positive outcome of the procedure, we can, the university can release the European Qualification Passport for Refugees, where is summarized the data related to the qualification obtained by the candidate. And in July, we have the first evaluation session for refugee in Italy, and the second week in November it was the second week evaluation, and the next in July, it will be the third evaluation process. But it could be a very important policy for our ministry, for our system, for higher education system. I don't know if you have heard me.
Yes. Thank you, Paula.
Then I disposal for the question about your recommendation and reflection about it. They are very important.
Yes. Do you want to add something right now?
I don't hear that well. Could you repeat? Please speak slowly, please.
Do you want to make more comment right now on the findings?
No, I can speak loud.
All right. Okay, thank you very much then. I think we had our 3 presentations right now. Now we will try to display all the presenters into one window. I hope it works. And we will try to address some of the questions that we received through the chat. Oh, actually, you are getting very active in the chat. It's flowing in. So let's take the first one. The first question is from Fernando Galan, who's based in Madrid for the Spanish Writers Conference. Hello, Fernando. Nice to see you here. And you were asking if there are different types of barriers if the students do have refugee status or are asylum seekers or have recognized any temporary subsidiary protection. So if the barriers basically are different following the status of the person. I don't know if Hamida would like to first address this.
Yes, in general terms, but in detail you can have a look at, for instance, the country reports that we have at the end of the publication, who in some countries also reflect on this, not in all of the countries though. Very clearly we do see a distinction on the specific statuses. In terms of asylum seekers, for instance, and this was also a question that someone from Ireland was asking, indeed, as such, asylum seekers usually cannot enroll into higher education with this status, but of course they can enroll as international student in a way. But more importantly, to come to the different protection statuses, as Fernando also mentioned, subsidiary protection, this is really different, for instance, with regards to whether they qualify for student support, which might be available to those with the refugee backgrounds in some of the Tandem countries. I believe it was 2 of them, but I would have to double check which of the 2, where this kind of support is actually means tested, and thereby, given that some of the refugees might have a difficult financial situation, might also qualify for this, but not if they are subsidiary protected. There are big differences, and this links also to this whole issue around the information gap. Now, imagine you arrive as asylum seeker, or you already have some sort of status. How do you find out what do you actually have access to? The information could be provided from the national level, from the higher education institutions themselves, but it's usually not very straightforward. But do have a look at the last couple of pages of the report for the country-specific information. Well,
thank you very much.
Perhaps one of the speakers would comment on the situation in their own country.
Yes, we are just trying to see the videos. In the meanwhile, as we are putting the videos back from the other presenters, Fernando actually responds to you, Ahmed, I think, by saying that, is there a real chance for young people who are not any longer in compulsory education to actually go into higher education? In general, he says, ministries in charge of migration put pressure on them to go into the labor market as soon as possible instead of studying, and most integration paths are planned in that direction. So aside of their own barriers, migrants also have the barriers imposed from the system.
Well, yes and no. I wouldn't say that I've pressure to go into the labor market, but in the end, at the end of the day, you know, I did mention that, for instance, all the national plans do put value on education as a vehicle of integration, but usually they put a stop to this at secondary education. So there's a lot of support for, and important support for swift access to primary and secondary, but higher education is not so highly featured indeed in those integration plans. Whether that has to do with the pressure towards the labor market, or perhaps whether this is just something that wasn't considered in the country yet, I'm not sure.
All right, thank you. Does any of the speakers would like to add something to the question that was just addressed? I cannot see my speakers. Stefan doesn't want to comment. Alexandros, would you like to comment? Yes, no?
It's not that I don't want to comment. It's a very difficult question to answer. I'll speak from Malta's perspective. As I said, we provide free compulsory education to all refugees. With regards to higher education institution, the right to access is the same as for everyone. However, regarding any waiver fees, refugees will be treated as third country nationals unless dispensation is offered by the higher education institution, but this is subject to its own discretion. So the barrier that does exist is a financial barrier, where they are treated like a third country national. I don't have sufficient information statistics to report on what is the position of the main university of the University of Malta, which is our main higher education institution with this regard. I am aware that they have several refugees studying with them, but as to the waiver of the fees, it is purely to the discretion. It is not established in law.
actually has a question for Alexandra, so I will let her asking it before closing the webinar. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, we seem to be under a bit of time. We're a bit under time pressure because we're already running over time. I hope you will let me ask or reflect on the presentations of Alessandro's and perhaps also of Stefan just for a moment. Thank you very much for the very straightforward and objective, reflection on the findings, especially with the case of Greece. Indeed, Alessandros, thanks for being so straightforward. It is a very difficult case due to bureaucratic reasons and so on and so forth, but an interesting case nevertheless. I just wanted to ask you, you said lack of leadership support across all different levels, ministries, higher education institutions, rectors' conferences, perhaps even. What's different at your institution then? Your institution does run programs for refugees. If I could ask a very small question to Stefan also, you already said when you were with your closing words, up to the university to decide who they want to enroll in that to the recognition agency. You may remember that in our findings is that one of our findings is that on the topic of recognition there is tremendous confusion who is actually responsible from the side of those who want the recognition, but also from the side of the higher education institutions. How come and what can be done at the policy level? Okay, but perhaps first, Alessandro.
Okay, thank you very much, Henriette, for the question. If I can be honest, and it's not just talking about my university now, it's the experience I have out of talking from different people from all around different European universities. I think it's an issue of rectors wanting to do some stuff to help the problem. It's a top-down decision, especially for Greece. And with the problems we have with the bureaucracy, I know that it's not only the Aristotle University, but it's also the University of Aegean, the University of Piraeus, the University of Patras, some universities where there have been some people that have been a little bit more sensitive to the issues, and they have tried to do some more stuff. It's not, I think that as a population, we are very sensitive and we have shown our hospitality on all different levels. Maybe we were a bit more lucky with the rectors or I would be honest about that and say, from what I know, that it's also an issue that it's a decision from the top that, okay, we will help, we will do at least some stuff. There's so many more things to be done, but I know that these things have been done just for the extra work that some people have worked on that. That's what I think, and that's my honest opinion. And that's why we try to network more with more universities and to do more. That's why the staff training is done as well, so that we mobilize more people, because I think we all want to do more stuff. And when we mobilize people, things will be done. And hopefully we can get more refugee students integrated in a European university. Thank you.
Yes, I will leave the floor to Stefan as well to address your question. Just a second, we are unmuting you. Yes.
You have been. Okay. Thank you for your question. A very pertinent question, and a problem I face very regularly. Let me make clear to all the listeners. We always advocate. Not just to Malta, but even when we are in Europe and with our ENIC-NARIC partners. The decision that, in our opinion, an ENIC-NARIC takes, whether a qualification is recognized or not, should not be final. Should an employer, or in this case a higher education institution, wish to take a student to enroll for further studies with them, that is purely to their discretion. So, to answer your question, higher education institutions have the right to carry out their own personal evaluation of a student's qualification. It makes good sense that when they have doubt of the qualification, that they consult with the national authorities or entities that has the expertise in this field. So quite often the University of Malta does consult with us for our advice. If we obviously recognize a qualification, that is a big burden off their back, and it facilitates the process. If we do not recognize a qualification of a student, the university is free to stick clearly to our patients and stop the process with the prospective student, or it can carry out its own further review of the student's qualification and his competence and decide for itself whether the qualification, which we do not recognize, because recognition that we do is based on a bureaucratic process of accreditation in the home country. And the university may determine that this unrecognized qualification does have, in fact, sufficient qualities, content, and learning that it would allow the student to easily take up further studies at the university. So I will stress again that all employers and all higher education institutions are free to carry out their own assessments for themselves. Their decisions is not binding on third parties, but they can carry out decisions themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Jumping up and down next to me because she actually wanted to say something.
No.
No. Just a quick comment, perhaps, and then we will also need to wrap up this webinar because we are already past time.
Okay.
But Marietta, please make your final comments for this.
Actually, I wasn't wanting to make one, but okay. Closing words. I'm happy to take them anywhere.
All right.
So yes, thank you very much for your contributions anyway, and thanks also for the summary on recognition practices from Stefan. I would like to also point to the other work of the IOM that Hertzboy, who didn't take the floor right now, had mentioned. You know, there's a lot of activities ongoing, both from the side of civil society and NGOs, as well as higher education institutions. And my final closing word is actually with regards to a comment that a colleague of mine made in the chat function here. Michael Gebel, the head of our unit, he again pointed to the great work that our institutions are doing across the European higher education area. You can look it up following the link that you can still see here in this chat function, which is EUA's Refugees Welcome Map. And yes, this would be all from my side.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Just a final word also from each of our speakers, and then I'm afraid we will need to wrap up. Stefan, I see that you are still unable, so if you have a final word you would like to share with us, please go ahead. Yes, your microphone is on.
You have been muted. Could you please repeat what was the question or the comment, because I had some audio issues from my end. Sorry.
Yes, I was just
okay. Yeah. Final comments. I understand that this is also a matter which is also politically charged, but from an INEC-NARIC, I think the issues that we find or that we see are actually quite pragmatic and bureaucratic issues. First and foremost, there is confusion, as one of the questions raised was, you know, is the recognition of an INEC-NARIC binding and final? As I said, it should not be. It should be there to help and assist higher education institutions to determine if a person is suitable to take up a course. And the second biggest issue, and as I mentioned in my comments, is I think language is the biggest issue. Aside from the financial considerations or the political issues, we have had feedback from the University of Malta that they had students with fantastic qualifications. Everything was in place, but they just could not take up the course because they had a massive impediment with the language. And until they have sufficient ability to follow the class, that will remain the biggest stumbling block. And that is a problem which is a big burden for refugees, third country nationals, and for any student. Basic level of competence in the language is necessary. Other than that, I thank you all for this wonderfully held webinar.
Thank you very much. I would like to now Paula for a last word, also because Paula was asking if she could say a word about simplification procedures. So quickly, a last word, please. Paula?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, of course. Yes, I would like to speak about simplification of bureaucratic rules, about student visa. I remind you that the directive of the European Parliament and the Council of May 2016 on the condition of entering and residence of third country nationals for the purpose of research, studies, training, voluntary service, pupil exchange schemes, and or education project and au pair. It was a very important directive, and in Italy, this directive came into force the last May 2018. And through this new law, we have contributed to streamline procedures for the access in Italy. We have clarified the procedures with our Minister of Foreign Affairs on the documentation required for access of the refugee or the students. I would like to know if the other partner have received this new directive. May I ask you the other partner?
Yes. Okay. I will. Thank you very much, Paula. I will also pass the words to Alexandros. You can still. Yes.
Hello. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss a little bit the Greek side. If my last words would be to all the attendees that have been so nice to listen to us for an hour and to participate, I would just encourage everyone to continue doing what they're doing. They definitely have interest in the situation, and we need to not lose ground, and we need to support the causes, because as much as there's negative policies against it, there's also good things about it, and I think we have a responsibility to the society and the universities to continue working for the good of the world, and not just of political sides and everything. This is the only way forward to me. That's why I would like to share with the attendees and thank them.
Thanks to you, Alexandros. Those are definitely nice concluding words. And finally, I would like to hand over the floor to Geertrui, who was there from the beginning with us, just for a quick words of conclusion, if you would like to.
Thank you. Also from IOM side, thanks a lot to all the participants for listening, and thanks to you in EOA for this great partnership. I really hope that together we can continue working on this, and as IOM, we're very open also to work with other universities in your network together to advance access and success for migrants and refugees to higher education. So we're looking forward to working together even more in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Geertrui, and thanks for being with us also on this webinar. All right, I think it's 3:15 already, so I think I will need to wrap up this webinar. I would like to thank all of you once again for attending, for your contributions and for all your questions. And I just would like to remind that you will, as you register for this webinar and we have your emails, we will distribute. I'm sorry. You have the backside of the webinar as I taught. You will receive an email with a link to this webinar, which was recorded, and you will also receive links to the presentations. Thanks to all once again for your participation, and we hope to see you next time for the next. Thank you. Bye. Bye.